this one. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, please. Thank you. Okay, looks like we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. I'm Michelle Day, citizen at large.
Sharon Brown, I represent the City of Fountain.
Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager.
John DeVoe, Woodland Park.
Warren Childers, citizen at large.
Microphone's getting.
No, the one to the right.
Yeah.
Whoop. Warren Childers, citizen at large.
Thank you.
Bruce Davis, City of Victor.
Tamara Dickner, City of Colorado Springs.
Aubrey Day at large.
William Bowles, or Bill Bowles, Park County.
Ellen Hasse, Teller County.
Ann Ash, Green Mountain Falls.
Kim Munchler at large.
Roy Rosenthal, Manitou Springs.
Tim O'Donnell, Kono.
Courtney Stone, citizen at large.
Okay, and in the audience, please.
Ken Prather, PPACG.
All right, thank you, everybody, for being here today. I appreciate it. Do we have any comments on the consent items?
I do have one to add real quick. In your packets that you were sent out, if you looked at them via physical instead of the emailed version, it was missing the board report from Jim because this meeting was so close to
The last.
the board meeting. So
Okay.
it is in here now, so if you want to look at it, Jim did do that for us. Printed copies available if you want it.
They're asking if there's any printed copies.
There are printed copies available back with Jess if anybody is interested. Do you need one?
I do.
It's online.
Oh,
Tamara?
I had a question on the meeting minutes on item 5B. We said it was Mr. Shane Ferguson. I just want to confirm that it was Shane, because I didn't recognize him, and I've met Shane before, so I just want to make sure we have the right person. Okay.
I could repeat.
This was
Okay.
funny.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
why
because it
I'm-
was like, it didn't look like Shane, but if it could, because this is meeting minutes for this meeting, correct? And it was not Shane that was here. So if we get the right person's name on there.
Did we catch that? Okay. Anything else? Okay. With the exception of the items mentioned, are there any, can I get a motion on the consent agenda? Or does it, I don't need a motion, do I? I need a motion? I don't remember. Motion.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carried. Okay, so I managed to lose my agenda now. Public comments, please. It was right here. It's over here. Any public comments? No? Okay, then we'll move into action items. Catherine Wenger? Hello.
We have a tip amendment, and part of that tip amendment is, let me get the microphone. There we go. Okay. So we have a tip amendment, which is our short-range program listing of federally funded projects. And every once in a while, we have a request to amend our project by either CDOT or one of our entities. This one has, part of it is a cost overrun request because last month we sent out an email saying we had some extra CMAQ, or congestion mitigation and air quality funding, available to our cities. And so we had a request from Mountain Metro for the funds in the amount of $51,383 to add to a project that they already have listed. And so this is just to increase that amount in our tip and to approve that cost overrun request. And then the other two tip amendment requests are from CDOT, and both of them are to add funds that are, I believe, state funds. Yes, state funds to two of their projects. One is the US 24 West, and the other one is intersection improvements at US 24 and 21st Street. And so those are state funds. They don't affect our regional funds, and we're just increasing that amount based on changes they've made. and I can take any questions.
Yeah, I have a question on that. So I see that Brian submitted an application, I guess a questionnaire.
Yes.
So can you help me to understand, should we have gotten something similar from CDOT for their request, or is that not the same process?
It is a different process. This
Okay.
questionnaire was just specifically for requesting those extra monies that we have for the region.
Okay.
CDOT, I believe the attachment had the request from CDOT, their letter, just requesting us to change that. And so that is in a separate request, and that's the typical type that we get from CDOT, was in a letter, and then we just make it formal.
Okay.
Since we don't formally approve their projects like we do for this one.
Okay. And then I guess my other question, sorry, is that it's 5.8 million, right? Just being a little nitpicky, we're missing an extra zero.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Yep.
Missed that. That is missing a zero.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is an action item, then I will need a motion, please.
I'll notice that it just stops west of Manitou.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
You can stay. Yeah, evidently, you have the next informational item.
Okay. All right. So this is to discuss some safety measure target setting that we will be doing next month for finalizing. You might remember this from last year because safety targets, we have to set new ones every year. And so these safety targets are part of performance measures that are required by Federal Highway. And they essentially, your region will create goals and objectives for the region, this one being safety, and then you set a target based on previous historical data on what you're hoping the region can achieve for that next coming year. And so Federal Highway says that MPOs like us, as part of the PPACG, can either approve or support the DOT's targets, or we can create our own regional targets based on just data from our region. Last year, we approved just to support the CDOT targets, and we're recommending that we do that again this year based on just that we found that we should do it last year, and we feel like we should continue to support those targets through our project selection process instead of creating our own. But I can take any questions you might have specifically on our targets or our performance measures or any of that.
I'm going to ask all the questions today, sorry. I know some people want me to leave early, so I apologize. Can we get kind of sense of how close is CDOT's target compared to what's actually happening in the past years? So does it make sense to use CDOT's targets for us? In the history, has it been pretty close?
It does make sense based on, there's attachment 2, it shows you kind of the historical data. Our data kind of lines up with them as far as the trend line, so they're seeing an increase across the state, and we're also seeing an increase in our region. And so based on trend lines in the state and in our region, it makes sense that we can support them, and it does kind of fit the data there. That makes sense.
I understand from the discussion last year, there was, if we chose to take our own measurements, it was going to be quite a bureaucratic mess between CDOT, the federal government, and us. And so if you want to go down that road, it's a lot of work.
It is, especially because the data we found is in our region is we're having issues with the serious injury count. So we're having issues with the data, which can be combined with other things of getting those through the state and then through Federal Highway. On top of that, the MPOs are required to set targets or support targets, but we don't have anything that says if you don't meet them, then this happens to you. Whereas the state, if they don't meet their targets, then they do have something that they're funding flexibility gets changed. And so helping support them and make sure that they meet their target will help the region and help the state as well.
So you mentioned, you mentioned that we had data of past years, the actual counts.
It's in the table.
Attachment 2 is the statewide.
So these are actuals, not not CDOT's targets from previous years. These are actually actual.
Attachment 2 is statewide data. It's the actual crashes from 13 through 17, and then the last year's targets that we adopted for the state, or the state's targets, are listed under the purple for 2018 safety targets, and then the 2019 safety targets are the ones that we are suggesting for this next year. And so we're currently in 18, and then 19 is the future.
Okay, thanks.
Aubrey?
Thanks. Do you know if our fatality rate is higher in El Paso County and our MPO counties than the rest of the state? And so to sort of go along with that, as sort of a multi-part question, are any other MPOs setting more ambitious targets? How do they sort of, or are all of them kind of going in alignment with CDOT's recommendations? And it wouldn't be bad to go below CDOT's, to target sort of more ambitious, right? That would only serve to help them. I can repeat those if you want.
Well, so your first one is our rate. There's a couple of the rates. There's fatality rate for them. Their target is 1.21, or they're currently at 1.211, and we are at 1.1 at 2016. So they're basing theirs on. We don't have complete 17 data, so we're basing on 16. So our rate is 1.1, and theirs is 1.21. So ours is a bit lower. But that has increased in 17 based on preliminary data that I've looked at. It's gone all the way up to 1.8.
Locally?
Yeah, so it's a big jump.
Yep.
The serious injury rate, theirs is 5.2. Ours is 3.7. But that has data issues as well.
Okay.
So the 15 is the one that doesn't have really data issues, and our rate is 9.4. So we're a bit higher than them in that
Okay.
as well.
So actually shooting for their targets is ambitious for us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Did I answer by your question? Oh, you also asked about other MPOs as well, but I can. Okay. It's kind of a 50-50. I came from OKC, and we did set some of our own targets, but we kind of found that it wasn't as helpful as maybe just helping support the state targets based on that.
Go ahead, Ken.
Dr. Call adopted their own safety target rather than adopting the state target last year. I don't know what they're doing this year. And I don't know how different their target was from the state target.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? Yes.
Thanks. So I think you said that some of the injury rate numbers were problematic. Maybe I misheard you, but it does seem interesting to me that the number of serious injuries, the rate of injuries per miles traveled and all that, and the just general serious injuries, they're all lower. And I wondered why do we expect that those will go lower? Or why do we hope they'll go lower? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, we actually expect them to go higher, to increase. We base our targets on a 5-year rolling average, so on average, the trend line is increasing.
Right.
It is lower. I think part of that is because of the data in our region is missing some in 2016 in particular, and possibly in 17, and that's based on reporting. And so there seems to be issue with reporting of serious injuries. The feds have actually changed the definition of serious injuries as well. And so that's starting to get implemented. And so we can see either a huge increase or a huge decrease based on what that definition is. And so we're going to see kind of fluctuations, and that's why they're doing the 5-year rolling average. So we're expecting volume to increase and accidents to increase with them. The rate should stay relatively, I think, the same, but they are expecting increases across the board on those.
Okay. So the 2019 safety targets are just artificially low.
Well, they're
compared to the
basing,
2018 targets?
yeah, I think based on last year, you can see the 18 targets for like serious injuries was 6.7, and now it's 5.5, and that's because of that decrease in the last 2 years. But I'm wondering if that's because there's some missed data changes, and so I don't know that it's artificially low, but it's just based on the best data that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Doug.
National performance measures, is that from the federal government based on our state, not targets, but actual?
The requirements, are they federally?
These here, the crashes.
Oh, the crashes
That
are
actual
state.
data?
These are just state data, Colorado. Crashes.
Provided by federal government? Or is it
No,
national?
provided by the state. They filter up from the police. The police provide it to the Department of Revenue.
It's hard to make any assumption out of this without having a ranking within the state where we're at for the different metropolitan areas. In other words, how's Denver, how's us, how's Pueblo? How are all these areas? Where do we rank within the state?
I'm not sure.
That would be a real good way to be able to see how are we doing. We may be much better than the state. We may be much worse than the different places, and not just the state average, because averages are averages. What's Denver like? What's, those different areas, and how do we rank as an area around here? That'd be real good information to get in a report.
Okay.
Because this by itself doesn't tell you compared to what, and that's what this is here.
Okay. I will look that up and bring it next month when we come for final action.
Yes, Ellen.
I'm curious, and if I'm displaying my ignorance, I apologize in advance. But Ann just helped me formulate a question, which is it possible to have some data regarding causality of the accidents so that we could, again, based on John's question, begin weighing factors? It seems to me if we had more specifics of information on causality as well as our rating with other localities, we could begin to formulate ideas about what to do with this information.
I can chat with our division director. I'm actually not our main crash person. I'm the performance measure. I do performance measures, which encompass the safety. So I can talk with our division director and see what kind of stuff we can get you.
Yeah. I asked because I personally am asked often what I can bring back from these meetings that our communities can work on for future improvements. And this looks like something that we might be able to get our teeth into if we had a bit more information. Thank you so much.
Yes, if I could interject too, my question was, I worked with law enforcement a lot during my life, and there are reports as to whether it was drunk driving, drug driving, speeding, just what happened in the accident. There are ways to quantify that, and that might help, like you put it very well. So I'd be interested in that too, if that would help, if you can do that.
Yeah, we definitely have all the crashes that we get. There's location information and causality and all that. We do have the information. It hasn't been compiled into one report that I'm aware of, but I'm sure if there's something we can bring back. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to promise for someone else. But I will definitely talk with our division director and we can see what we can get you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Ellen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate it.
So next, I just wanted to mention real quick, next month we'll bring these back for a final decision on if we want to support the state targets and or make our own regional ones. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Joe Urban.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me to kind of give an update on our funding process. As part of that, I'm going to give you AAA 101. Some of you need it, some of you don't, probably. Many of you know we are the largest department in the AAA. We have roughly 13 employees, and our annual budget is somewhere around $5 million, just a little bit shy of $5 million a year. We are that budget is comprised of roughly 55% state funding and 45% federal funding. And then we allocate that out to programs at the rate of about 60% of that funding goes out to local, mostly nonprofit providers who do transportation, meals, case management, counseling, that type of thing. And then internally, we keep roughly 40% of that program, or 40% of that funding. Part of it goes towards administration. That's limited to 10% of the total. And then we also have internal programs for family caregiver counseling. We do a huge amount of insurance counseling, as I think a lot of folks know. We do case management. And then we offer probably the largest information and assistance database in the city. So a combination of internal and external programs. Our allocation process is two-part. We have a regional advisory council, which is a board that's a committee of the PPACG, much like you folks, exclusively for senior issues. And they have a subcommittee called the Technical Review Subcommittee, which meets as needed each year to look at funding proposals that come in, RFPs from individual providers, decide the funding levels on those, and then allocate that funding. That's done in two parts. The big one is usually done in June for a July 1 fiscal year start, which is what the state, which is what our state funding runs on. And then there's a mini cycle that we generally run in October to allocate what we call carryover funding. The federal funding allows us on a normal year to have a 10% carryover if we're not able to spend all that money or whatever extenuating circumstances come up. We're allowed to carry 10% of that federal component over to the next year. So we can allocate that usually in the early fall to kind of fill in gaps and cracks and hit areas that have had a high need. The last 2 years have been anything but normal for us. You can make your own assumptions why that is. Our federal allocations have come extremely late in the year, and so last year we actually had, we would normally get one option letter at the beginning of the year with our total allocations. We had 5 last year, and we also suffered through 5 continuing resolutions on the federal level, so that delayed things. So we didn't get our final allocation until April is kind of the short story. And that put a lot of challenges on folks, particularly the providers. If you give them money, if the allocation comes in April, you give them money in May, they've got a month and a half to spend it, and then it, the carriage turns into a pumpkin at midnight. So on June 30th, everything just disappears and we start over again. So consequently, we had a huge amount of carryover. The state allowed us last year to disregard the 10% cap, which was critical in our functioning. So a normal carryover year would be somewhere in the vicinity of $250,000 to $300,000. Last year we had almost $800,000 in carryover, and then thanks to Governor Hickenlooper, he added an additional $4 million statewide into his budget for fiscal year 19, and so we got an extra $400,000 roughly out of that for our local level. So instead of having $300,000, we got about $1.25 million to deal with in our carryover funding this year. I think in your packet, there's a spreadsheet that kind of details how that was allocated. Because of the size of it, we're actually going to do 2 mini funding cycles. We did one last month, and then we will do another one probably sometime in January. We still do not have any of that carryover funding. Because of the delays at the federal level in getting money out, and the state has its own challenges as well. So we anticipate getting that sometime probably in the middle of January, and at that point we'll do another funding cycle when we know the exact amount of money, and we will allocate that all out to providers. And they just go through it's a very simple proposal process for those mini cycles. That's a long speech. Does anybody have any questions?
Who are the providers?
Yes.
So it looks like you sent it to the PPACG board on the 12th. Did they approve?
They did approve. They did approve the allocations that were dictated in this sheet, and then we will come back to them again. It does go through the TRS, it goes through the RAC, and then it heads to the board. So we have to meet all those meeting date cycles. We anticipate that that second mini cycle will probably hit the PPACG board, ideally in February, but at the latest March, because we have to get the money to folks in time for them to be able to spend it.
And then I have a follow-up question on that. It looks like almost 50% of the carryover award that you guys requested and got approval is all transportation-based, like transportation-related items. And we had several, I guess, meetings several months ago where there was conversation about how to more efficiently provide transportation than what was currently in the system. Has some resolution come to that? It was an information item, I believe, for us. But can you guys give us an update on that?
There's a lot going on. I'm not sure you've got enough time to hear the whole story, but there are efforts being made. Transportation is without a doubt. If you go out and survey folks, which we have, we recently did a fairly comprehensive statewide survey, and there's a local survey going on right now. Some of you may have even gotten requests to be involved with that to assess need. Transportation will come in 1, 2, and 3 on everybody's list, and then you start getting into housing, or actually housing is probably second, and then you go transportation, and then you get into all the other things. So it's a high need area. Efforts have been made to establish a call center, working through Mountain Metro Transit. The short story, kind of from our viewpoint, is that there's a lot of efficiency that's already out there. We have tremendous human service providers in Colorado Springs, the Silver Keys and the Invitas and the Fountain Valley Senior Center and places like that do a tremendous job of maximizing the resources that they use. There's a little bit to be gained, but the one thing that we know for certain is that there's always going to be more need than there is funding for that. And our capacity is good. We don't have capacity issues like some places have. Some of the mountain communities don't have enough bus service to serve the needs of the folks. Here we have plenty of providers. We just don't have enough funding to meet the demand and the need, which is common as well in Denver at Dr. Cog. I know they have the same challenges. It's a huge demand area.
And thank you for sharing that. I'm from Ellen Hasse from Teller County, and I just wanted to write on what you said and point out that one of our concerns is in the rural areas west of Manitou Springs, going into Fremont County, parts of Park County, as well as Teller County. East of Colorado Springs, there are sections of El Paso County where the need for transportation reconciliation, many different approaches, feeding efficiently to make more opportunities available, is still a significant part of our criteria as citizens. So that you recognize that and continue to work on it is our heart's desire. We also want to know what we can do to help bring the information forward and be part of the resolution. Rural transportation for our experienced population aging in place is a big concern.
It's huge.
And I can tell you in Teller County, the state demographer was kind enough to visit in 2010 and again in 2015 and reiterated that in Teller County, 44+% of our population is aging in place. We don't have the combination of transportation needs in place yet to meet the existing need, and that portion of our population is growing. So we're very sensitive. I know my brethren and sisterin in Park County, yes, a good old-fashioned term, our brethren and sisterin in Park County and in Fremont County are dealing with a similar challenge in a separate way, but it is very much in our sights on a daily basis. So just wanted to reiterate that we appreciate what you're doing, and we are eager to participate in reconciling even further.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that has been a need area that's been on our radar for a while, and I think probably Eastern El Paso, Teller, and Park to a certain degree have made more progress in the last year than in a long time. The LCC, I don't know if everybody knows what an LCC is, a local coordinating committee. It's a group that works on transportation, specialized transportation issues. And the LCC in Teller, which is comprised mostly of folks from Cripple Creek as well as Woodland Park, has made tremendous gains in the last year in terms of networking those services, looking at ways to work together. Eastern El Paso is being addressed, I think. I know Invita has opened up a fixed bus route to Calhan, which is fairly recent. That's within the last month and a half. Silver Key has expanded some of their operations to eastern El Paso. Park has, I just found out a couple days ago, Park has actually got scheduled a bus route now that will run on a fixed route bus that will run from Fairplay to Breck on a regular basis.
Yes. Park, we also have been trying to get people medical trips into town from the 285 corridor. Had very good luck. With the rest of the county, it's basically the transportation vouchers where your neighbor can take you to town. And that we're having trouble getting funding, as you know.
The funding, I think, is not as big a challenge as the providers
Right.
oftentimes.
I say this, you got basically one-on-one out there,
Right.
and you're not going to get a bus. So.
Exactly. Sir.
Do you know the status of that call handling system they were putting in?
The One Ride call center has
Yeah.
been in effect since July. There's some speed bumps that we're working through relative to that. It's an attempt to bring together very disparate systems. Senior transportation, ADA transportation, and general transportation are unique animals, and bringing all those together, particularly in a software system, is very, very difficult. I'll give you a simple example. Is Older American Act funding that we run does not allow us to charge for rides. By statute, we cannot charge for a ride. We can ask for a donation, we cannot charge for a ride. City funding is required to charge for a ride. How do you rectify that? And that's one in a long list of very significant challenges that we're facing. It's a great group that's working towards that goal. It's just it's been a challenge. So it's in progress. It's open. You can call the number right now. You can get a ride. It's probably going to be smoother 5 years from now.
Go ahead, John.
I have a little question, too.
Ann?
With the Americans of Disability Act and that sort of thing, does this help our homeless veterans up in the mountains? Can they participate and get a ride if they need a doctor?
There are other options, generally speaking. There are significant options for veterans to support funding in that regard, and some people probably know more about this than I do. Courtney probably knows more about it than I do. There are options out there for folks that are veteran-funded programs that are above and beyond what they would get just by being 60 years old.
Oh, okay. Because I thought of a coordination of. There's so many programs.
The primary grant that funded the call center, the initiation of the call center, was a VTCLI grant, which is a veteran-directed grant.
What were the initials?
VTCLI. And don't ask me to tell you what they mean.
VTCLI.
CLI. Thank you.
You bet.
John?
For the long-range plan, looking 10 years down the road, what do you see as far as automated driverless cars? Small vehicles picking up people that don't have to have wheelchair help and do that just to keep the costs down. There's got to be things. All the car manufacturers are looking at that stuff, to be able somebody to stop by, pick you up, take in a simple thing where it doesn't require somebody wheelchair access or things like that. Are they looking at stuff like that? Because the aging is just going to, the population is going to keep getting older.
Absolutely. I'll tell you that's probably one of the top topics on the national scene, where you've got the organizations that are looking to the future, think tanks. It's a huge part of what they're looking at. The challenge that you have to get past, and the tough one for them, is the ability. Oftentimes people that need rides don't necessarily just need the car to pull up in front of the house. They need somebody to help them with their groceries into the house, or they need to have somebody help them get over the curb into the car. And that's something that a driverless car can't get by. That's an obstacle. So I think that we're going to get to that point at some point. But absolutely, it's seen as a critical component of the issues that we face in terms of shortage of access.
There's always going to be a niche for some of that.
Absolutely. It's definitely on everybody's radar.
Okay, thanks.
The folks at Lyft and the folks at Uber are studying the heck out of that right now.
No self-interested.
No self-interest.
Aubrey?
Thank you, Joe. the transportation demand, I know this is my soapbox, but this makes me want to scream infill, as loudly as possible. But often there are nuances, that I don't consider for older adults that maybe the infill argument doesn't apply as well. Are you all talking about, do you all advocate for infill? Is there something I'm not considering in terms of senior population that makes that argument less?
We would certainly support anything that relates to infill. It's kind of above our pay grade, if you will. It is an important part, and we're going kind of the opposite of that. Banning Lewis brings a whole new dynamic into how we serve seniors with bus transportation. So I think that's going to be an important part. It's kind of a phased approach. I know from the folks in the LCC here locally. We look at what's the next thing to fix, and the next thing to fix is how you schedule a ride and how you get a ride. So that's kind of where the call center came about. We know that we have capacity. We know that picking up a telephone and asking for a ride 2 years from now is probably not going to happen. So we need to look to apps that you can use on your phone, that you can, the one-click part's going to be more important than the one-call part, let me put it that way. Okay. To answer your question and not avoid it, infill is a critical component of what's going to happen. There's other minor dynamics like the homestead exemption actually figures into that, because a lot of folks would love to move close to downtown into a smaller house, but they're going to lose their homestead exemption because they haven't lived in their house 10 years. So you got all those little dynamics that play into people downsizing. And I think there's a general, I don't want to speak for every older person in El Paso County, but I think there's a general feeling that a lot of folks would like to be able to downsize when that time comes, and there are obstacles in the way of doing that right now.
That's a real good point. Yeah.
Both financial as well as regulatory.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any other questions for Joe? Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for letting me talk.
Okay, member discussion. Does anybody have anything? All right. Items for the next CAC meeting.
I'm going back in time to that member discussion.
All right. Sorry.
As we prepare for our January newsletter, I highlight a member event or activity going on each month. So if any of you knows anything interesting happening in January, February, or March, I would very much appreciate if you drop me an email so I can make that what I highlight, because each of your regions is important to me.
Thank you.
I might make a quick announcement. I was sort of filling in on the Water Quality Committee, which is rewriting all the water stuff, clear all over the county. And I'm really not terribly qualified for that. I was very interested. But I'm so pleased to announce that our Board of Trustees has appointed a young man named Nathan Scott to serve on that committee. And, of course, we all know how important water is in so many ways. So I think he'll be great, and he's also going to be on our Planning Commission, which gives him direct feedback into our little town. And what was it, Jessica, he worked on GIS something. He knows about that.
It's Geographic Information Systems.
Okay, so he's really a good technical kind of young man, and I'm just real happy that he stepped forward to do this. So I thought you might like to know that.
Thank you, Ann. Anybody else? Yes, Aubrey.
Just a quick question, and I can email this separately if needed, but I saw in the minutes that there was talk about looking for members for subcommittees for the census, and that you were going to follow up on that.
Tell us more about that.
I will indeed be doing additional follow-up on that. The census committee chairs are going to be meeting January 10th, so I'll do a report back to everybody, likely via email, to say here are what we need filled.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Anything that anybody would like to see for the January CAC meeting or some point in the future?
I'd like to know more information about the status of the environmental committee or, that sort of thing that is underway. If you know anything, maybe you could tell us. Okay?
We have that to give an update as soon as we have one.
Okay.
Anything anybody else would like to see or hear about? Okay. Your schedule is in your packet. Our next meeting is January 30th. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a wonderful New Year, and we'll see you next year. Meeting adjourned.
Christmas.
Here early.
My goodness.
Exactly. I'm like, so next week, an hour, and then